importance of this project for me is all in the spirit of community, in the spirit of connection and support, in the spirit of identity and belonging, and in the spirit of growth. For me, to gather with this specific group of people is a way for me to celebrate and know that there's something that you're doing on a level that is bigger than yourself.
Bianca, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Sorry, I was just on mute.
I've invited 3 fellow Filipino-Canadian artists for a round table to discuss our experience as Filipino artists here in Canada, to share a little bit about our process, the influence of our families and our culture and intergenerational relationships, some of what we've learned, part of our journey, and how we engage in community. The 3 artists I've invited for this segment are Bianca Miranda.
More sideways?
Mike Tan.
Hi, Mike.
Hi.
Jackie Aquines.
Magical
condensed milk.
Yes.
Oh.
Of course.
Oh,
Another level.
yes.
Whole another
Just
level.
Just a smidge.
Of course. Hi, everyone. I'm Bianca, and my pronouns are she, her, and I'm primarily an actor, or that's where my training began and centered, and then now I'm a performer and a theater creator, or sometimes I even call myself a playwright. And I also do a lot of arts admin because I love working in the arts. And I was born in the Philippines, and my family moved here when I was 13. I think it was a month before my 14th birthday. That's what I remember. And I'm Filipino. Yeah.
My name's Jax. My pronouns are she, her, they, them. I identify as a queer Filipinx and Canadian. And my practice is videography, photography, and I'm writing again and playing music, which is my original foundation of any art that got me into any spaces of artistic people was music. So I'm returning to that quietly.
Hey y'all, I'm Mike. I am Filipino Chinese Canadian. I was born in the Philippines, and my family immigrated here in the mid 80s when I was very young. I think two and a bit, not quite 3, I'm pretty sure, if my math is correct. And I work primarily as a theater actor and performer, and a photographer, documentary style photographer. So I typically document artistic processes, public art, and cultural events. And performing wise, usually plays that are written and then also some devised and collective creation performances I've done over several years as well. So I think that's about it. Yeah. Yep.
My name is Linda Key. I am, my pronouns are she, her, they, them, and I am Filipino. Both my parents are Filipino. I was born in Ontario. My parents actually met in Canada and then started a family here. And we moved around, actually for the first 10 years of my life, we did move to the Philippines, and we lived in Europe and the Middle East. And I was about 9 years old when we settled back in Calgary, actually. So that was it was interesting coming back to Canada. I felt like at 9 years old, even though I was born here, it was a new country for me. I am mainly an actor in film and TV and in theater. I'm also a theater facilitator. So I use theater as a vehicle to explore social justice issues. And similar to what Bianca was saying earlier, her experience as a performer, she's, I started to write also. So I've written a short film. I started writing comedy. I spent some time in Vancouver doing that. And currently, I've gotten funding to produce a web series pilot, which I also wrote and I'm producing. So yeah, I guess most of us do many different things.
For me, I feel like arts in general started as a young kid. Like it was, I remember like singing at reunions and family gatherings and always like busting out Reflection by obviously the Lea Salonga version. Um, that's the only one. Um, and bringing that cassette tape, that -1 cassette tape with me everywhere.
Throughout my life, like I found like theater and performing quite late, well, somewhat late in my life. It wasn't until high school. It wasn't something I did. And prior to that, I was primarily in visual arts. Like that was my jam, like was drawing, painting, and building things. And I had a very kind of more of a technical mind. My dad was the only one of his 6 siblings that went to university, and he paid his own way in Cebu, and I didn't. When he moved to Canada, none of that. He got an architecture degree, and when he moved here, that completely didn't. It was basically useless piece of paper.
And so when I feel like when we moved here and I was trying to look over just like paths in university, I just jokingly at a food court said, what if I took theater? And the first response was laughter. Like, that is ridiculous. Like, what are you talking about? This was a hobby that you're clearly very good at, but what do you mean? This is not a career choice, basically.
Yeah, I align with many of the stories where my parents encouraged my brother and I to be anything you want, as long as it's a lawyer or a doctor. So then I finished my degree in English, cultural studies in Montreal, and I got into law school because I was like, I'm not going to do sciences again. Even though I dragged math classes throughout that whole process, but I didn't go because at the time when I got my letter of like, you are now accepted, I discovered that I could do theater. There was a space in musicals. In one weekend, I got the role of Columbia in Rocky Horror and the Acid Queen in Tommy. in Montreal, and I was like, oh, okay, let's do this. And I was done with school after that. I didn't want to do it. I think my dad still carries around my letter of acceptance in his wallet.
And when I got to find theater, which was also kind of a weird, not food court story, but it was definitely, my first choice was for university, like for post-secondary, was kinesiology. Actually, I was really like fascinated by movement. I was never an athlete, super, like, if anything, I was like a math guy. Like I did fairly well in like school all throughout my life, because my parents were like, do good in school, get a job that pays well, so that you don't have to break your back to make a living for your family, which is what they kind of both did. And they are still actually, you know, they're into their approaching their 60s, and both still working, and actually working through the pandemic right now.
You know, I mean, I think it's only, my mom's a nurse. She's still working like part-time now, like slowing down, oh, thank goodness. But she's like in her 70s, like beginning. She still says, you know, maybe you should think about nursing, or maybe you should think about law school. But I'm not saying that, I don't mean to say that disrespectfully at all, because my mom's never, like, nobody in our family has done art, or been in the artist field. Nobody, like, everybody in our family is either in medical or in law. My mom encourages me to in paths that she's familiar with. Like, there's nothing that she could offer as an artist, like, as far as advice is, like, with the path. But she is always supportive of, like, she loved my art, my music, and she loves my paintings, and like excited to see this book. But I'm not gonna push her to, like, I would like to get to a point where she doesn't have to worry about me. That's where I'd like to be.
But any change in like a plan or a path that we have previously already agreed upon is like, it's just, it's horrifying. I get it. I feel like if I was, I mean, I can't put myself, or if I was trying to put myself in their shoes, like, it's, uncertainty is always like a scary thing to like come to face with when it comes to your children, I feel like. But basically, so I did the 4 years, and then after those 4 years, like, honestly, I was getting gigs, so I was like, I thought that it was proof enough to, like, oh, there's something to this. But no, I still went through the 2 years of the education degree. I had 13 days left of my practicum when I was hit with like a very real, just like, series of anxiety attacks. And so, like, long story short, like, I feel like, I mean, I was still able to take a theater degree, and I'm very lucky to have done that, but with it came kind of like a backup promise, so that after my theater degree, I would have to take education. Yeah. Yeah.
I just wanted to say, you know, I grew up in a typical, there's the stereotype of having a mom as a nurse and a dad as an engineer. And that's who my parents were. And I feel blessed because that's what gave me the opportunity to be a Canadian here and to be able to choose a life in the arts. My mom, who is now passed, you know, she was a great nurse. But she also loved the arts, and she was a singer, and she was adopted by a family that owned a cinema, you know, so my siblings and I were very exposed to musicals and films and Motown and dance. And so I'm really appreciative of that. But in another way, you know, my parents split up when I was really young, and my mom raised us on her own, 4 kids. And so I think the difference for me was by the time I was in high school, you know, my dad wasn't around to give me, if my dad was in my life, I think he would have forced me to go into engineering. And my mom was, I was so lucky because she said, if you, whatever you choose, you got to make yourself happy. So I never got that from her. I never got the pressure to study something else than what I chose to study, which was theater.
I think security is why our parents move here in the first place. Financial security, so that they don't have to worry about us. My mom worries about me all the time.
I do feel very privileged to be able to do what I do in a place like Canada. And I think getting back to my parents' generation, you know, I think they did what they had to do. And I feel like I do what I get to do.
Yeah. As I was approaching like my adulthood, my folks started to see that. I was like, oh, this seems to make you happy. And I've been really lucky that they've always kind of been really supportive in what I've chosen to do. They also go like, well, if that doesn't work, you can always just be a doctor. You're smart, you can be a doctor. And I'm like, yeah, that's easy. Yeah, it's just so easy to just be a doctor. But they've always been super supportive for basically whatever I needed to kind of do my thing. Those fields, I was so immensely unhappy and stressed out all the time. And the cycle of wanting to, like, the cycle became that I would actually do more work and I ended up being more separated from my nuclear family. But now getting to make and build, I get to share those things with my son. In fact, he's all like, when the world was a bit more open, he would be with me as I was documenting art events or documenting public art. So that relationship is so much different than myself and my father, because I'm able to take him with me, and yeah. So
yeah, I couldn't remember the lyrics to Mac the Knife, which was the end of my reality TV career. But I made it through 4 episodes.
But as a profession, I've mostly just kind of goofed around in university or in high school when I first found performing, and that was through improv and theater sports at Loose Moose. And I met a bunch of friends at school who were like, you'd be fine at improv. Why don't you do that? And I was like, okay, I guess I don't have to prepare. Great. This is super awesome. But so I did that, and that felt really good. To be, I guess, really kind of like to be seen in the moment, and kind of have that heightened sense of that heightened sensitivity to like offers that are being placed around you and the things that are put in front of you, and responding in a way that feels exciting.
And I mean, honestly, even when I first came here, I auditioned for a school play, and I was so sure I wasn't going to get in because, I don't know, for a number of different reasons. Like, obviously, it was my first year in, like, an exclusively, like, English-speaking school, and, like, I was new to the country, so I just didn't think I would even get in. But I was Glinda the Good Witch, so, yeah. Anyway.
When I applied for university, I applied for kinesiology first as my first choice, and my second choice was theater. And I got an acceptance letter for theater, and I didn't get a declination for kinesiology. And so I was just like, oh, okay, I guess I'm doing theater now. And that was it. And that's what led me on the path of performing.
One of my first jobs after theater school, I was hired by All Nations Theater Society, which is now Antic. And I just wanted a job. I just wanted an acting job. So I got this job where we got to travel southern Alberta and tell stories historical stories of Alberta. And I was with them for a few years, and without really knowing anything about it, I was introduced to forum style theater, which is a style of theater where you can use the format of being on stage and telling stories to affect positive change on social issues.
It's been a journey, and I'm okay with that. But now I think I had to see and understand different perspectives so that I would be politicized. Yeah, I think in certain paths that I may not have been aware of this, the systems that are in place without experiencing some of these things like firsthand. And that's, I mean, you can go your whole life without learning about critical race theory.
I felt like I had to be not me. I had to be more Canadian. I didn't really know. So I didn't really feel like, in Vancouver especially, I felt, and especially in film and television, it's so stressful because sometimes the writing or the show, they're looking for a token, Asian person. I would go into auditions and they would say, "Can you do an Asian accent?" And I'm like, "What kind of accent?" So
Mhm.
the industry is really looking at you as not an individual.
Kind of in a weird place where I was lucky that my graduating class in university consisted of, how many of us? Like 4 of us were women of color. And was it 4? Yeah, and I think there were 2 white guys and like a white woman. So it was we were definitely the majority in that class.
Yeah, it's interesting because I definitely consider myself the first word that pops in my head is lucky, but I don't think it's not just luck, obviously. There's situations that are, sure, but in this case it is, I think, for all of us, like a matter of intense curiosity, I think, and seeking fulfillment and trying to find performing and making and being in that space where we get to represent something human on stage or on screen feels right.
When I was a part of a process called Invisible with Handsome Mouse Theater, that's when I got together with now my art partner Keisha, and that's when we started creating a show called The F Word, and it's a show that talks about our navigating our lives in bigger bodies, and that I feel like that process has been the most fulfilling thing as an artist.
They get to dictate what our bodies represent. And for so long in my kind of acting career, I've been I took it as a sense of pride to be able to, similarly to you and Bianca, to be able to kind of transform and be kind of a racial. It's just like the like, oh, he's clearly not white, so he can play everything else. Which I have, like, I will say, like, I've played, Black South Africans, I've played Japanese, I've played Korean, I've played multiple types of roles because I was just not white. And that rift of, again, like you were saying, Bianca, of just being either, or sorry, Linda, you were saying it just like, oh, you do an Asian accent. Like, what does that mean? Like, are you Vietnamese? Are you South Korean? Are you Japanese? Are you, like, there's there's a massive generalization that takes away kind of the individual spark and specialness of our kind of capacities as individuals to be able to reach towards.
I feel like it's kind of an interesting thing. Like, I feel like my community engagement started when I felt passionate about like the personal things that I was experiencing. Like, I feel like I'm now starting to dive into like, oh, what does artistic leadership and how can I contribute? How can I contribute to changing what that looks like in this landscape?
Um, so as far as like being in the community, I think for me, I'm just trying to say something when I feel it, and to try and more actually to try to unlearn the politeness, the kind of, I don't know, colonial politeness of shutting up and assimilating.
I got into English lit, into cultural studies, because I wanted to be a writer. Like, that was the first, that was the path I wanted to choose. And I got into creative writing classes that inspired me and like encouraged me. But then like my voice, I found at the time, I was only writing mostly about my own experiences as a Filipino person in my family and what I was going through. But then I started to mute that perspective, because I thought there was no value and no space for that, and that I should comply with the dominant culture of centering whiteness so that anybody could play the character or voice that I was putting out there. So yeah, that didn't help. But honestly, like, the community engagement has been helping my voice and helped me formulate and settle into the identity that I embrace.
Like, I did a workshop in Banff about with a group called 3.7, and 3.7 being, that's the percentage of women and non-binary folks who are represented in the artistic leadership of Canada. 3.7. So we did that workshop in Banff where we did things like role play about, you know, like, how do I speak to a white colleague, let's say, who says something like, who does a microaggression, and how do I interrupt that? So it's a lot of role play like that. And it's funny because, you know, like, it's funny that it's us who have to meet in a separate place to train ourselves how to do that. But it is needed, because I find myself most of the time like stuck and frozen and really not having a voice to interrupt those kinds of microaggressions that happen at our workplace.
There's these things that happen at the intersections. And actually, I learned a lot. I was so much more conscious of this when I became vegan. Just acknowledging kind of like these kind of these learned like automatic responses to things rather than critical thinking.
But I really appreciate you saying that, because that gives me hope that that the more empowered we are in our own voices, the more people have to recognize that, okay, I can't just get away with shitty behavior. Like, so yeah, I'm thankful for that.
There's also like a lording over of wokeness that I don't appreciate as well. I don't know if like where there's an intellectual, like this ableism in regards to knowing more, that allows people to kind of look down on others, and that just kind of then becomes a perpetual cycle.
Yeah, there is definitely within the activism of whatever field or like cause that you champion, there is a piety in knowing more and being more woke. But everybody's in their own path. Like I would never have been launched into understanding anti-racism, and if I wasn't like at the brunt of it, and I like of racism, and I hate saying that. It's embarrassing to say, because I mean that's clearly out of privilege that I was able to get this far in my life without really being clued into what type of life we're living. I mean, we're still like, it's 2020, and like we're still seeing like Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery's lives being like ended in a way that does not reflect like the civil rights movement at all.
Yeah, I guess in my process of just kind of being in the world and trying to unlearn things, I'm hopefully just trying to allow space to reflect and kind of step back a little bit more, rather than being so reactive to things. But that being said, not being afraid to respond, and not being not being afraid to rock the boat, so to maintain my own position in the hierarchy, but to in fact I be like, yo, this is a hierarchy, what's happening, rather than just being like, okay, my spot is safe, so I'm just going to be quiet and stay here, versus like, you know what, that's a thing that's, and we should all kind of take a look at it.
But the understanding that there is a hierarchy in place doesn't mean that we have to knock the people at the top down. It's a matter of allowing those who are currently in positions of power to understand that they need to understand what equity is, understand that these systems are currently here to serve their voices, but what our response, I'm going to speak for myself, my responsibility is to show that we have voice, and that we have power in our spaces. There's so much that I have to unlearn as well, but my community engagement with the Filipino community, and knowing how amazing and resilient and beautiful we are with community organizing, especially around now with COVID-19. I'm learning how to love my Filipino-ness, and that's part of like why I'm now able to put pen to paper and trust my voice again.
The idea of this feeling of responsibility as an actor of color or an artist of color, the interest in like giving ourselves the space to explore and not having to show up being perfect. Through this journey of kind of decolonizing my mindset, I also feel like, sometimes I'd be judged for not being Filipino enough, or like there's a spectrum.
There's a like a lack of understanding of, if you can't be put into a box in a sentence, then people don't, that's what a lot of folks who in power want to be able to do, to maintain that power, to be able to put you into that societal cultural box, so that the definitions are clear and manageable. Hopefully, I mean, it feels good to like start to acknowledge all those very, very little things that make up people and make them like truly beautiful, like really as far as being a specific being. the broad strokes and generalizations, especially in an oppressive way, it just becomes so as a means of control, or as a means of diminishing the power of people who are oppressed. There's just so much there, I find, when the expectation is come as you are, and I want to hear you.
When I see us on the screen, the four of us, I couldn't imagine this when I was a theater student at Mount Royal. So things have definitely changed, and I continue now to connect with being of service to the community, being a facilitator to help other people share their voices and their stories. And that gives me, that for me creates more meaning in my work as an artist, especially with this piece, this web series. All the lead characters are Filipino female Filipino characters, and there's a mother who's a senior and a daughter, and so for me that's like, without thinking too much about it, I don't see that in mainstream media, but it's also a very personal story to me. So I'm really grateful now that I have a chance to do that.
Storytelling has always been embedded in like our culture. That was our way of learning and expressing what we have learned. So, and I feel like in a way, like that's a lot of what we did today, is sharing stories, and which is a part of, which we don't get to do often, and it's a part of us.
I am so grateful for you guys. I feel so blessed to spend this time with you. It's a weird time, and I just want to say thank you.
I am appreciative of having the ability and privilege to be able to do this, and to be able to do this with you three specifically is so sweet and so cool. And this to me is like the little bit that we can do to be able to actually realize that we're not, for me personally, it's to be like, oh yeah, I'm not alone. I have these people feeling the same things as me that are able to mobilize and to gather, and whether it's just to have a sounding board, or generating new ideas, and just to know that we're not alone, and that we can help each other.
I just want to thank all three of you too for being a part of this conversation and validating my experiences. Yeah, it's comforting to know that we're all looking for each other, and that we're all you have an audience. Whatever you put out there, we'll be looking for your work and your voice and your truth.
Yeah, thank you.
Sweet.
Also, I just want to say that model minority is a joke, so.
Yeah. Yo, yeah, totally.